Hi, this is Community Builders, the podcast where we look for the helpers in the Chico community. I'm honored to be here with my guest today, Wendy Fairon, principal of Chico Country Day, as well as an all-around interesting, helpful person in this community. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let me think here. Let's start off with, can you tell me about Chico Country Day School a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we are, one of the first 30 or 40 charter schools that started in California. Wow. So we began in 1998. We're TK through 8 public charter school. We have about 600 students. We follow a project-based learning, pedagogical approach, and we aspire to, build the next generation of learners and change makers in our society.
I love that. I've had the pleasure of seeing your campus, seeing your staff and students in action, and it's a very impressive institution you have that you're running, a great group of folks. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your philosophy within Chico Country Day and what your hopes are with this school?
Sure. I think at the foundation, schools need to be places of learning for kids and for adults. And so my role at the school prior to now, I was a teacher and then also the director of education. And I tried to build learning ecosystems for the adults so that they could create really great learning for the kids too. Because I really do believe that what you create with the adults and what they're able to experience, then they can turn and create that for the kids as well. So we want to break down the silos that are typically in educational settings. Typically a teacher walks into the room, shuts the door, and people don't know about the brilliance happening. And so we want to elevate the work that's happening throughout the school. Foundationally, I believe that all students are brilliant. And so how can we extend what our thoughts are about SMART, what SMART can look like? It can look like lots of different things. And to create a space of trust, safety, and respect so that the teachers can take some risks and try things with their kids. And maybe it doesn't go great and maybe it's the most amazing thing, but we have to be willing to try things because we need kids who are willing to take risks and who are willing to put themselves out there. It's what our future needs.
I love that answer. I love that so much. I'm curious what Chico Country Day is not a public school?
No, we are.
Oh, you are, but you're a public choice school. Mm-hmm. And can you maybe give me a little bit of a breakdown on what the difference is?
Yeah, so charter school started quite some time ago in California. Typically started by a group of really committed community members who want to offer something different to the kids. And we're really lucky in Chico. We have a lot of school choice, and the district offers some school choice as well. And so, the idea is this group of people who are really committed to a particular vision write a charter. We have ours on our website. It's a good 150-page read. And you basically outline what you're going to offer the community. And then you bring it to your authorizer. So our authorizer is Chico Unified School District, and they read through the charter and ask us questions, and we engage in dialogue. And then that first charter is hopefully approved. And then you have 5 years to carry out what you've shared that you're going to do, and then you have a charter renewal. And so when you go back for your renewal, every 5 years, you say, this is what we said we were going to do. Here's our progress on those outcomes. Can we continue to keep doing this? I actually think it's a really great process because it puts you in this cycle of here are our goals, here's how we're doing, here's where we think we can improve. So that's our defining document. And then we're funded just like regular state public schools with attendance and, kind of those typical methods. So.
That's so interesting. Thanks for explaining that to me.
Yeah.
This is it's enlightening. So how was that process for Chico Country Day? Did you guys get a lot of enrollment? Was there some interest in your charter?
Yeah. So, I wasn't around in 1998 when the charter first started. So I started working at Chico Country Day in 2009. And then my first really big charter renewal cycle that I was a part of was in 2019 for the 2020 school year. And that's when I had moved into becoming an administrator. And, so we're kind of always looking at our charter and preparing for our renewal. It's been a really positive process. In addition to our charter, we're also WASC accredited. So that's the Western Association of, I don't know what the exact acronym is, schools and colleges, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so we're in that cycle every 6 years as well. And so our goal is really to align those defining documents and make sure that we're doing what we've promised to the community we're going to do.
That's awesome. Do you feel like you are making right on all of those promises and that you're hitting the marks? I can say that the reputation of the school is extremely high.
Yeah.
What would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's being in touch with our community and listening to students and listening to the teachers and the adults. It really is about community partnerships. You know, it's not just me sitting in my office writing these documents. It's about community involvement. We just worked on our strategic plan last year, and that's another one of those documents we need to align. In our latest renewal, we wrote more about project-based learning. Cool. And so I think that's, you know, there's room to shift and adjust through each charter renewal, and it's really exciting that we've really put our stamp more towards project-based learning, because I think that's the method and that is the approach that helps kids connect with their community, make an impact, make a difference right now.
Why do you think that is with project-based learning? Is that just the students feeling connected to something that they will actually get their hands in?
Yeah, you know, we started looking at project-based learning in maybe 2011. And one of our very first sessions as adults, we sat down and we talked about our most meaningful learning experiences that we had as students.
Oh, cool.
You know, to have a whole room of adults start to like surface those memories, you know, you notice some patterns. And it's maybe like, for me, it was my 8th grade teacher who had us do a mock debate of the election that was that year. And, you know, the group projects and the presentations and, you know, just those times when kids are extra engaged in school.
Yeah.
You know, nobody said, you know what, I really remember sitting and filling out those worksheets.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this is a way that kids are active participators in their learning and get to showcase their work. We aspire to create things beyond just the, you know, the student turning something into the teacher, getting a grade and getting it turned back. So that's one model of completing your work, but we do exhibitions of learning. And so the kids are in this cycle of reflection and critique and improving their work. And then they present it to an audience.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have more applicants than you're able to seat at the school?
We do.
And how do you mitigate that?
Well, we have a lottery process. So families who are interested in sending their kids to the school, we have kind of an open lottery time period. Random selection happens in early March. And then we share with families, you know, either where they are on the wait list or whether they have a spot for the upcoming year. I wish we had a spot for everybody. Actually, you know, I get to meet a lot of the families as part of enrollment, and, you know, they come and do tours, and I meet them at different enrollment events, and I wish we had a spot for everybody. But we don't at this time.
How can the community get involved to help make a spot for everybody? What
that's interesting.
would need to happen? Y'all would need, I'm assuming, more staff, facilities, funding, that kind of stuff. But to me, you're making such an amazing difference for the students that are able to attend. How can we support you?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, partly it's with community partnerships. So it's a really big part of project-based learning. And our teachers are really focused on building their community partnerships this year. So that's really exciting. That's awesome. You know, it's great to invite people in to come learn about kids' projects, and then maybe they get to serve as part of the critique panel. We've had, you know, city council members come in for 3rd grade, and they learn about the city, and then they create their own city. It's called Box City. And they create businesses, and they elect different positions within the town. And so that's been really positive. So, you know, wherever we've done some tables at the farmers market, and we've had lots of people approach us like, I'm a biologist. I work on like water resources in the area. Like, if you ever need somebody, you know, here's my card. So those are all really helpful opportunities for our kids to engage beyond just the walls of the school.
Cool.
Because learning happens beyond the walls of the school and, you know, outside of 8 to 3, especially nowadays.
Yeah, it's really true. How did you decide you were so interested in education?
That's interesting. You know, my mom was an excellent teacher. She had a career in education where she taught grades, you know, 1st through 4th or 5th, and then she was also a reading specialist. And so she taught in a different district than I attended. I grew up in San Diego. And so when I had time off and she was in school, you know, after maybe 8 or 9 years old, I would go with her to school. and spend the day in her classroom and help her. And, I feel like it just was kind of running through my bloodstream. But so when I came to Chico State, I majored in liberal studies with a plan to eventually become a teacher. But when I graduated, I wasn't sure where I wanted to live or what I wanted to do next. And while I was at Chico State, I worked in the catering department on campus at Chico State. And so I really enjoyed that. And I was like, wow, a job that'll get me up at 6 a.m. And, I got to help host receptions and things for different departments. It was really fun. So when I finished up at Chico State, I drove cross country and enrolled in culinary school in Providence, Rhode Island.
Whoa,
I veered to the side for a little bit and then came back to education.
Fascinating. So in an alternate universe, you're a chef or something.
Yep.
Well, that's cool. What made you want to go the route that you did in education rather than just staying as a teacher? Mm-hmm. What made you pursue administration?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting series of events. So our school was started on the foundational practice is called integrated thematic instruction, which is really a great way to deliver instruction. It's where, things are integrated, where you're learning about a science concept and you're doing writing about that and all of those things. And so as a middle school teacher at the time, we all taught our individual subjects, and it was really difficult for us to integrate. And so we heard a little bit more about project-based learning at High Tech High, and my colleague and I were able to write a grant, and
Sorry.
That's okay.
Get him out of here before he's in too many of the shots.
It's like the Mike Pence fly.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I didn't want. All right, he'll stay out of the way now, right?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
Grant.
okay. So I think it was 2011, we wrote a grant through Chico State, and it was about teacher-driven professional development. So within the group of people who were awarded the grant, there were lots of different projects, but we really focused on project-based learning. That was our team from Chico Country Day. And with that grant, we were able to visit High Tech High multiple times, have them come to us and provide professional development, and really started to build a partnership with them of what project-based learning could look like. There was a second round of the grant. We wrote it again, and we were able to get more teachers involved, and then a third round, and we were able to get the elementary school involved as well. I really loved all the learning that I could do. I love being a learner, and I am fascinated by adult learning and how we learn and make progress as grown-ups. And in 2015, I was awarded a fellowship to go spend a year at High Tech High to earn my master's degree in school leadership. So it's kind of like this domino of all these partnerships kind of aligning. And so my family and I, my young son at the time, we moved down to San Diego, and I, got my master's degree. I worked for a year at High Tech High. I was a resident in one of their schools and also took courses at night.
What a journey.
Yeah.
Can I ask a little philosophically?
Sure.
What is the importance of a quality elementary school experience in a community? And what do we stand to gain by having good elementary schools here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I see that the spot for elementary schools and even middle schools too is to really be a place of family engagement. And so for the kids to feel welcome and that they belong and that they're making a difference, and it's not just preparation for something down the line, that they are involved in their community now. And I also see us as a place for resources for families too. In 2020, we were able to hire a full-time social worker. We have also started a lot of different parent learning events and parent learning nights. And so however we can be a spot for learning for the kids, but also learning and support for the adults, I think that's how we benefit our entire community.
What does a community that doesn't value quality elementary school look like?
Ouch. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, agreed. But what's at stake here, right? What are we trying to stay away from?
Yeah. Gosh, I don't spend a lot of time imagining that.
That's probably good.
Yeah, the facts are that the world is changing. And so I think we need to be aware of that and be really purposeful and thoughtful of what we're doing. And not that we need to throw out everything that's ever been done in schools, because there's a lot of greatness and beauty. And how can we keep elevating that work? So I think we need to be a space for learning for everybody, And gosh, what would it look like if we weren't? I mean, then you end up with problems like kids not wanting to come to school and adults who feel like the school is adversarial. We want to be really thoughtful that maybe some of the parents at our school didn't have great school experiences when they were younger. And so how can we break down those barriers for them so that we're a place of belonging and inclusion for everybody? We do student-led conferences. And I'm really aware that for some parents who walk on our campus, it might be really uncomfortable to come set foot on a school site. So what can we do as a school to support families and feel like, yes, I belong here, I'm a part of this educational process. The adults here have my students' best interest in mind. They know my kids. I think that's something that I've always felt Chico Country Day has done a really good job of, is that our kids feel known and seen. And then that just amplifies. Like, I mean, imagine a kid experience where they go through their youngest years of school and they feel known and seen. What happens to them as they get older? That is a foundational piece that I think is critical.
Really well said. Your mother was in education. How about the rest of your family?
Yeah.
And do you have other influences?
I do, definitely. Yeah. My dad grew up in Belgium, and he moved here when he was 18. And he had a really different school experience. He was sent to a boarding school.
Wow.
And but his mother was also an educator, an extremely brilliant woman. And then both of my parents, their first language was not English.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that plays a role too in how I view things. My brother and sister are not in education, but sometimes they talk about like, I wish I would have I wish I had my master's degree and like could teach at a junior college, or, I really like that you get to make a difference. And, so we talk about it a lot, but they're happy with their careers too.
Do you feel the difference that you're making?
I do. I hope so. I mean, it's so multifaceted because sometimes you don't see it right away, but we just had a student come back to visit us who is a senior in high school, and he had a challenging time when he was in school. And there were lots of ways that we supported him and his family and tried to figure out what we could do to best help him be successful. And success might have looked really different to him than it looked like for another student. And he came back and he's doing really, really well. And it's, maybe we didn't see it day to day,
sure,
but he has a foundation that he's working from now that I think is going to serve him really well.
Did he come back to show you?
I think so.
Is that his,
I think so, yeah.
And so clearly, even through a struggle or a hard time, he didn't walk away from your school feeling like, forget them, I never want to see them again.
Right.
He left feeling like, I'm going to be what they saw in me. I'm going to come back and prove it.
Yep.
I love that.
It was really cool.
I mean, you should feel that, and you should be able to feel that you are doing that, because that is, what your brother and sister are talking about when they say you get to make a difference. That's how I feel too when I see teachers and when I see schools like that. That's makes such a huge difference in the community. Those experiences for young people, it's night and day. It's the opposite of what I think a lot of people had in school that they carry with them for a lot of their life.
What I wouldn't give to have my grandparents in a video. Imagine your children and your grandchildren hearing your story in your own voice. We started Life Well Told to preserve your voice, your memories, and your legacy. We make it easy to preserve your memories with a well-crafted professional video. Every step is designed to create a timeless keepsake for you and your family. The process is very easy. First, you'll answer a questionnaire. Then we'll schedule a 2-hour interview in our studio. And finally, we'll deliver you a beautiful video for your family to enjoy for generations to come. Your story, your legacy, forever. Begin your journey at life-well-told.com.
How might someone who wants to follow a path into education or even into academia, how might they find that in them like you did?
Yeah. I think that people have to see good in children and want to help support them. And that's not for everybody. The day in and day out can get kind of messy, and it can look like a lot of different things. But I think ultimately, if we can realize that we're making a difference and that we maybe don't see it immediately sometimes, but that it is happening, and we're creating spaces like this for kids. I think just simply getting involved in volunteering is a good starting point. We have Chico State students who are in the kinesiology department who come teach PE lessons at our school from time to time. Yeah. So they learn with their professor, and they learn all about teaching kids. And instead of just keeping it at the university level and theoretical, they come teach a group of kindergartners or third graders or fifth graders and actually get to try it out.
Yeah.
So I think any of those kind of hands-on experiences, like what is it like to sit down and read a book to 20 kids who are possibly rolling on the ground and, have lots of different things going on? Like what does that look like? And there are lots of ways to be involved in the school. I mentioned our school social worker, we have a speech pathologist, we have an occupational therapist, we have a business office, we have HR and payroll. So there are folks who are involved in our school who support the learning of students, but it looks a little bit different than, just maybe a more traditional role of being a teacher.
Yeah.
So I think that's really exciting too.
What is the most rewarding part of early education? And I would assume that it's very interesting to see kindergartners that are very close to essentially, toddlers or babies, and eighth graders, is that at the end of the spectrum, is like really close to being like an adult, voting aged person in a few years. What do you see, and what do you find is like the most rewarding?
The most rewarding. I find it really rewarding to support the teachers who support the kids so that they can do their very best work every single day with the students. So as much as I can remove barriers for the teachers, that's what I aspire to do, so that they can do their magic with the students. Additionally, though, so I taught middle school for a really long time, and actually every year that I taught, I always taught the highest grade at my school. So I only ever saw kind of that end experience of students. Yeah. And in this role, I get to know kids from the time they enter, our school in TK, kindergarten, and see them all the way through.
Yeah.
So the group of eighth graders we have right now, I remember when they were kindergartners. And I'm thinking of one student in particular. When I used to go visit in his kindergarten room, he would always come over and he would sit on my lap and grab my arms and kind of give himself a big bear hug with my arms. And now he's an eighth grader.
Wow.
And the benefit to that is like, I see you being an eighth grader and doing the eighth grade things.
Sure.
And also I know who you are. I know, I know this kindergarten version of you too. And so I love that I get that viewpoint now of seeing the kids from, 4 and 5 years old all the way up to being 13 and 14. It's really, I'm very honored to be a part of their lives for that amount of time, and the parents' lives too.
Right. Yeah. And it must be so interesting too to, other than their peers, their parents are the only adults who see that change and that progression and that like whole perspective of a person growing, other than you and teachers.
Yeah.
Has there been challenges around that? Or some students, I know the answer is yes. So are some students trickier than others? And what keeps you motivated to see it through and to watch maybe a challenging student become what they could be?
Yeah. Just on Friday when I was leaving from work, I saw a colleague's car in the parking lot. And so I stopped in to just, wish her a good weekend and all that. And she, we've been colleagues for years and years and years. And she said, you're a little bit of an idealist. and I don't think she's wrong. And I really took that as a compliment because I hope to never lose that. So I've been an administrator for a long time now, and I've seen a lot of ups and downs and a lot of things come my way. And I'm grateful that she still sees me as an idealist because I don't lose hope, and I don't lose hope in our kids or that things can change. One challenge sometimes of being in a TK through 8, our kids experience sometimes, maybe they had challenging behavior in 4th grade and now they're in 7th grade, but their peers are still bringing up, oh, but remember in 4th grade, you were so mean to me during soccer or whatever the case may be. And so helping kids kind of process that and move on and be willing to see the changes that kids are making, and supporting the culture of our environment to be like, this is a place where you might make some mistakes. You have still opportunities to grow and show up in a different way if you want to make those changes. Like, just being a really supportive and positive culture for everybody.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with the teachers as well, because that's obviously such a big distinction between being a teacher who's, very directly interacting with the students towards being in administration. And give me a little bit of insight on what it's like being the leader of a group of teachers.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm so lucky. We have the best teachers. I'm so inspired by the work that they do. I'm also not the one with all the answers. When we all get together, the genius is in the room. They all provide so much insight and so much learning for all of us. And so, I mean, they're just fantastic. And what I hope to create is that I meet their needs as individuals so that they are able to meet the individual needs of their students. So I really feel like it's important that what we value and what we support for our adults is what we hope to and value for our relationships with the kids. So, I want to create a spot where teachers can tell me what they're struggling with, and it may be in the classroom, it might even be outside of the classroom, and how can I show up as somebody who can support them no matter what that might look like. And then in turn, a student maybe in middle school who hasn't turned in their homework for a long time, maybe it's not a punitive discussion. Maybe it's more like, hey, I noticed this is going on. Like, why are you coming in late? What's going on with your homework? And really coming from a spot of curiosity. And that's what I hope to do for the adults in our buildings too. Like, hey, I noticed that seem a little off lately. Like, let's talk about this and try to work through it.
Oh, that's excellent. How did we end up with the best teachers in this community, and how do we make more?
Yeah.
How do we encourage people in college or beyond to get into teaching and to hit those marks?
Yeah, I think about this a lot,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's our highest leverage. We need to have the very best teachers to meet the needs of students.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we provide really exceptional professional learning. We trust our teachers. That's what it comes down to. So, during different times, we have allocated more of our budget toward professional development and professional learning. Instead of buying $40,000 worth of textbooks, we might invest $40,000 into the professional learning of our teachers. And sometimes the state structures of education don't support that. There are a lot of accountability measures in place, and we follow those. And in addition, we have to be a human-centered ecosystem at our school. And so it's the humans who make the difference. So if we can provide them with really great professional learning, then they can provide what our students need. Because a textbook doesn't know the kids. The teachers know the kids. So how can we continue to help them?
What are some other ways the community can be involved in this support? Because I feel like what I'd like to be able to ask is like a specific donate to this, volunteer at this, vote for these kinds of initiatives.
Yeah.
What can be done to see this succeed to an even higher degree?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, if I love thought partners, and if anybody sees this and they're excited about what they're doing and they want to see it amplified, we've talked a little bit about adding a high school. We have talked about a TK through 2 micro school that's just really focused on literacy. We've talked about replicating our K-5 that we already have. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities and ideas. I would love to partner with Chico State and maybe make a lab school on their campus and have internships there. I mean, the big ideas abound.
Yeah.
So I love a good thought partner, and then, action steps to make it happen.
Yeah.
So that's one option. I mean, the voters in Chico have been really great in passing the last 2 bond measures that helped us improve all of the schools in our area. Measure K and Measure C. So Measure K was one of the first facility bond measures where charters were also involved. And that's not always the case. And so that's really exciting for our community. So our charter schools are improving in their facilities as well. And then, like I mentioned too, the community partnerships and I have an angle on this, or I might be able to, I'm part of the watershed and I'd love to have students come out and visit, and, There are lots of ways that I would love for our community to be our text. And so how can we get kids in the city more, doing work around our community and being involved in the people and the projects that are already happening so that they see themselves in our community even more?
That's excellent. Do you feel like this community is a pretty supportive to education community?
I do, yeah.
I love that. And I'm curious how that came about. And I do also get that sense. Is it because you think of the college and the community college here? Is there another reason? What is it about this community that does so good at valuing education?
Yeah, I mean, it must be the university and community college. I think also people realize the pillars of our educational institutions all throughout the community. I think it's a really great nod to Chico that we have so many options, to have, Hooker Oak and the dual immersion and, specific programs within the school district. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
And then to also have options within charters too. And we all kind of have a little bit different viewpoint. And I think that's great for families.
Yeah.
So they can find out, what is the right next fit for my kid?
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about what you think draws teachers, and in particular, the kind of teachers that want to tackle difficult situations, and what we can do to help encourage that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I know that's really vague, but give me like a little bit of why do some teachers want to run towards the fire and help?
Oh, that's a great question. I think teachers, I think all people want to be trusted and have autonomy, and then support as well. And so we create a space where teachers have a lot of autonomy and they can be curious about a variety of ways of teaching. And then we can typically find a way to support their interest and their learning to make the next best thing happen for their kids. So I think teachers who like that structure, it can sometimes be a little bit more nebulous because it is not just, it's January 27th, make sure you're on page 842 of your book, and tomorrow 843, right? Like it's really open what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they have to be able to embrace some ambiguity.
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortable with ambiguity. I kind of like it, and I thrive in that space.
I can tell by the way you're answering these questions.
So, we have to create that space for teachers. Also, every single class that they get is going to be a little bit different. So,
Yeah.
If I've been a fifth grade teacher for the last 6 years, those ought to have been 6 different looking years.
Yeah.
Because it's a different group of kids. They have different needs. I'm a different grown up. My context is changing year after year too. I kind of walk around with like project potential goggles on all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
always thinking of like, what could be our next project? What could we do? And then think about the kids that we have in the school and how do we make it happen?
I love that. What's something you wish the community knew about the elementary students in this town?
All kids and all students have genius within them, right? Like there's no limit. So let's not box them in, and let's figure out how we give them access to abundance and opportunity. And they might be a square peg, and let's not just offer them a round hole.
Yeah.
Let's do new things for them.
I love that so much. All kids have genius in them. How did you land there? Is that something you've always known and believed? Is that something your experience has proven true, or is it something your experience taught you in the first place?
Yeah, I think I've learned that more and more as I've gotten older, and then my own kids have taught me that too.
Wow.
And where my older son had a challenge learning how to read. It was really difficult for him, and I noticed how even at our school, that a lot of how we measure what smart looks like comes down to reading skill. And so I think it's really important that obviously that's a super important skill, and he has acquired it and he's doing excellent now. And how can we make sure that kids aren't disenfranchised from school because somehow along the way they're taking a little bit different amount of time, or, it's a little bit harder for them to learn something. And I think one of the first, you learn things in little snippets sometimes. And when I taught 7th and 8th grade, I had moved up from 4th grade. And in 4th grade, the kids are still idealists along with their adult teachers. And when I got to 8th grade, I had a student who I could sense he didn't feel like school wasn't for him. And I spent a lot of time thinking that, and that was before I had kids of my own too. How do you go from younger kid elementary school to upper middle school and thinking, like, what was part of his pathway that now he didn't feel like he was part of school, or it's not for him?
What happened in those few short years? Yeah.
And how do we make sure that kids don't feel that?
Right.
Because all kids have things to offer. And so how do we give them different opportunities? And we've had kids where their final product isn't a written essay. Maybe it's a podcast interview, or maybe it looks like a video that they did and they did a voiceover. And so how do we create spaces where kids can show their genius in lots of different ways?
Excellent. I loved that you said redefining what smart looks like. And it instantly gave me this image of in days past that was maybe defined by your SAT or your standardized testing score, and things like reading, and in my opinion, only part of the picture of what smart or what intelligence looks like. And how would you define what smart looks like today?
I mean, people being advocates and being curious, and it can look like so many different things. Being contributors, seeing their place in the world, having those basic skills that are needed to contribute, but then where's the opportunity for creativity and things beyond that too? So I think smart maybe doesn't get defined by somebody else. Maybe we want kids to feel capable and feel like they have something to offer, and then they will, right? Like, there's a lot of mindset to that too.
AI.
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking.
Okay, I'm curious. How has that become a part of your life?
Yeah.
Your professional life and your students' lives?
Yeah.
Because it's happened fast, and probably by the time this episode comes out, it will be different again.
I know.
But
yeah, you're right. So one thing that's been really cool in the last few years at Chico Country Day is we have been involved in a lot more like statewide initiatives.
Oh, cool.
And so about 2 years ago, it must have been like, ChatGPT was launched in like November, and then in January we were approached by a group who had given us money in the past called Silicon Schools Fund, and they wanted to bring a group of educators together for kind of a pilot. They weren't really sure exactly what we were going to do, but they wanted to get us together. We traveled down to Oakland a few different times, and they asked if we had any teachers who were willing to participate. And of course we did, because our teachers are learners and they like to position themselves at the forefront of what's happening. And so a 4th grade teacher and I traveled down to Oakland a few different times and worked with this group of educators, also folks from AI EDU and a few other spots. And then we ended up sharing our project that we had been working on at the Google Workspace in San Francisco.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so that teacher has gone on. She's keynoting at an AI event at the end of the month in February to share more about how she uses AI in the classroom. So all of that to say, we have to not be afraid of it. I think that's the most important. I use it on the regular in my job. One particular instance, I needed to get some really important information, safety information out to families quickly, and in the midst of making phone calls and doing kind of all the other immediate needs, but I also wanted to inform our families of what was going on. And so I was able to, in ChatGPT, just put in the critical elements of the communication, preview what it put together, adjust it a bit, and then get it to our families. So something that might have taken me 45 minutes to an hour took about 8 minutes, and then I was able to get the communication to families and move on. I've seen teachers using it to, have the kids write something, upload it into an AI tool, and then ask what the tone is of my writing. Or, are my transitions effective in this? So, using it not to take the place of the thinking and the learning, but how can I use it as a co-pilot? I think that's the best way to use it.
What are the implications for the future of education with this? Because one thing I've heard is for anything kind of outside of the classroom that needs to be written. It's very difficult to kind of keep track of the extent to which students are just using something generative to make their work. Has that already factored in? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's factored in. I'm sure that students are doing that from time to time. And also, my hope is that we can streamline a lot of the administrative tasks that teachers need to do, kind of streamline some of the lesson planning. There are some great AI tools for planning project-based learning where you put in the grade level and the standards and, what you hope to create, and then it can come up with a template plan. And then, of course, the teacher adds in their expertise and their curiosity and their creativity from there. I think we need to give kids assignments that speak to things beyond using AI to just sort of check the box. So how do we create experiences where, an example might be we're learning something in science and we're learning about erosion and we're all going to adopt 12 inches of, next to the creek in Bidwell Park, and we're going to check on that 4 or 5 times during the year, and we're going to do scientific drawings, and we're going to write about what we've seen. Well, that doesn't really lend itself to like typing a good prompt and getting that filled in. But are there opportunities maybe where the teacher can say, hey, we want the newspaper to know a little bit more about this project you all have been working on. Can we use AI, or let's come up with 3 different versions and then modify one together to let people know about what we've been doing. So how do we create those good experiences so kids aren't afraid of it, and so that the adults aren't afraid of it, but not have it replace the thinking that students need to be able to engage in?
What I kind of like about the way you're framing it there is that it really lends itself to what we were just speaking of, which is like, how do we define smart? And it's kind of reorganizing that conversation, because when we think of, how fast you can do math or things that may have made you smart in recent times, that is suddenly out the window. And even the, smartest person is now nowhere near as smart as an AI operator or an agent. And so what you were bringing up about being an advocate and being able to be kind and have your situational awareness, that suddenly has shifted to being like a much more obvious litmus test for whatever, if we're calling it intelligence or smart. Do you feel like that shift is accurate? Do you feel like those skills are now coming closer to the forefront, and now the standout in a classroom isn't going to be who's the fastest at their multiplication tables? It's now a little bit more of these other forms of intelligence?
I think so. It's really interesting because I think in some ways technology and the advancements have brought us further away from some of the human contact and human connection. But I'm hoping that we're going to swing back to seeing that that's the most critical. Sitting down and having conversations and getting a group together toward a common goal and face-to-face interaction. And how do we help kids do those kinds of things?
I'm really happy to hear that optimism. You hear a lot of not optimism from people in education around AI, and it is like, I don't want to gloss over that there are like very scary implications, and there's a lot of economic implications for what jobs are going to be available. I've also heard it said that most kids in elementary school now, when they are college or working age, are going to be applying for jobs that don't exist currently.
Absolutely.
Does that ring true to you?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, even kids who were in our elementary school 8 or 10 years ago. I mean, think about the kids who are graduating from college now. What's college going to look like in 10 years? Like what? Yeah. I mean, the world is changing so fast.
Which again is like, to me, is proof that we should be listening to teachers, because you have this amazing perspective of what young people are thinking, what they're doing. You also have probably the most information as to how to prepare young people for applying for a job that we can't fathom at this moment. And can you speak to that a little bit? How do we prepare kids for unknowns like that?
Well, none of us have a crystal ball, unfortunately. But I think that I think that it also speaks to the community connection, because I agree that teachers are the most in tune with the kids and what's happening with them. But as you were saying that, I was also thinking about the kids and how important it is to listen to them and amplify their voice and make sure that we have a learner-centered school system too. But then also those community connections are key and pivotal. So if we can think about our business owners and folks in our community who are seeing the change and experiencing it now, what do they need down the line? What kinds of employees are they hoping to have 5, 8, 10 years from now? What would they love to see in an elementary, middle school experience, maybe high school someday, to prepare our students to be the next leaders in our area? And so that's where we're all intersecting.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it just by ourselves. Because I think, in lots of ways, we don't have the industry experience outside of school to help inform us of what might be the next need.
Right.
So those partnerships are key.
I love the community inclusive perspective about that. I also think that those other skills that you're emphasizing at your school, it's like kindness and advocacy and curiosity, are the other skills that are going to suddenly become more in demand than ever before, because so many of the other technical skills will be, de-emphasized in exchange for an agent that can essentially do it. So what we'll be needing is essentially these, they were called soft skills, I feel like, up until recently, but that seems to be switching on us.
Yeah.
Why value curiosity?
Oh, that's my favorite.
Me too.
I will share what I learned from my first son, because I think we learn a lot from our kids. And I saw him growing up and being so curious about the world around him. And I had already worked in education for like 15 years. So being around kids was not a new thing for me. But seeing how he interpreted the world and how he tinkered and did things, I was like, oh, I hope he always stays so curious. And then I thought a little bit about my own school experience and where sometimes I was put into a box a bit, and maybe I didn't get to explore my, the full range of my curiosity. And my hope at that point was, I hope that our school system always supports kids' curiosity so that they leave more curious in 8th grade or whichever grade than they were when they first came in. And I don't know that schools always do that, but that's my hope, is that we keep that curiosity alive. Because I think even as we look at the bigger problems of the world, or even as we face challenges, like if I as an adult can come to the problem with curiosity rather than judgment, then I think that we're more able to make a human connection about what the thing is also. So.
I couldn't agree more. Curiosity is my favorite virtue. And I think that encouraging it is only a good idea. And I think I love that you have front and center in your goals that your students graduate more curious than when they began. I think that's excellent. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for being an advocate for young people in this community, for teachers in this community. I'm grateful for the work that you do here in Chico, where I live, where my family lives.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being a guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a pleasure.
We'll have to do it again soon.
All right.